Hello and welcome to this month's episode of Pro Spotlight, where we feature our tax pros, the people that keep Taxfyle running. I'm Christian Ortega, and on this episode we have Russell Webb, who lives in Houston, Texas. Russell, thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it.
So, Russell, how long have you been an accountant?
I've been practicing accounting for 15 years. Been licensed CPA for 6 years.
What made you decide to pursue the career?
I wish I could say that there was something that made me decide to go into accounting. It's kind of just an odd story. So when I was at orientation back in college, back in 2003, there's a lot of kids that have ideas of what they wanted to be. I didn't have any idea what I wanted to be. So when we were segmenting off into our groups, and they would say, business majors go here, engineering majors go here. I just went with the business majors because I figured there might be some opportunities there, maybe something that speaks to me. And when they were handing out the degree catalogs, they weren't really telling us what each degree catalog was. I saw one that they were about to hand out was blue, and it turned out that was an accounting degree. So that's how I chose my degree and stuck with it ever since.
Even though you didn't have that initial thought of, I want to be an accountant, when during your time studying accounting did you realize that this was really something that you would enjoy and you'd want to pursue further?
Well, I think it started when I could see that, it's something that everybody really needs. It's a job that you don't realize that it's something that you need until you need it. There's always going to be taxes. It's, like they say, the two absolutes in life are death and taxes. So I always figured, at least once I chose my degree, that there might be some job security. It would just be a matter of getting into the field and then starting. And once I started actually working within it, then it started making a lot more sense. It became a lot more enjoyable. It was kind of like, I really like puzzles. So to me, it was like that you get this just folder or a stack of papers, and your end result is turning it into a tax return. And so I always found that part enjoyable.
Now that you've had years of experience in the industry, how has that perception of your role in accounting and why you like it changed, or is it still the same?
Now that I'm entering my 16th year of doing taxes and working with small businesses, I really found that the public accounting side of things was always a little more enjoyable. When I first started, I thought maybe I would just go into admin for some company and just do general ledger entries or keep receivables, payables, stuff like that. I never really thought about the public accounting side. But once I got into it, I start to learn more from clients, from other CPAs, and I feel like there's just the growth opportunity is way more. And so I feel like in my now 16th year, that I've learned a lot more. I'm able to help others, educate others when needed, and I'm still learning myself every day. So that's what I always think that is really beneficial about the being a CPA.
How has your career changed since you graduated college, and what have you learned the most during your postgraduate career?
Well, when I first started, it sounds bad, but I really had no idea of anything with accounting. Despite having a 4-year degree, I felt like the college really prepared me to pass tests, but there's really nothing compared to actually just going in and being tossed in and handed a return, whether it's a partnership return or an individual return, corporate return, and saying, here you go, make sense of this and let's see what you can do with it. I remember having to, one of the very first times when I was starting off, is I had to do a 941, which is a quarterly payroll return for an employer showing that they pay payroll taxes. And I basically had to look up on my phone, which at that time was a flip phone, the instructions. And this was all done within the little paper, kind of newspaper packet that they gave you back then. And it was something that, it taught me that as you go on, you're gonna hit road bumps, but you're gonna find ways to get past them, and that's basically it.
Where do you currently work and what is your role at your firm?
I currently work for a premier CPA firm in Houston, Texas, Riley CPA. We provide all sorts of services. We're a top-down, full-service CPA firm. We do everything from advisory, consulting, tax, budgeting, and something else that we do is we really help others with their retirement plan audits. That's something that we do. The Taxfyle thing that came on about 4 years ago, we heard about it and thought it was something that could provide another revenue stream while also helping us learn more, see what else is out there, and broaden our horizons.
How did you hear about Taxfile?
I think that Quentin, our managing partner, he brought it up to me one day and said that there was something that he saw in an article that was just, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, that they were starting up. And he said, what would you think about this? Do you think this is something that might interest you? And I've always been under the mindset of, more is more with our firm. I've never been one to turn down a challenge. And so I thought it sounded exciting and was an opportunity for us.
Why did you become a Taxfyle Pro?
Well, after the first season, about when they did the onboarding and everything, and I got tossed into an outsourcing client right away, a workspace where I was doing business returns. And I found that really enjoyable was that here I was with, they would just hand me the returns that needed to be done. And I was able to go in and kind of do what I've always liked about this job, which is go in, study something, make sense of it, and put a puzzle together. So when I started with that, it was basically, they would say, hey, they're like, the work you do you want to be on another workspace? And I said, go for it. Yes. I mean, I've always been one to say, let's go for another workspace. And now here I am on about, I think, 10 to 12 different workspaces, and always trying to see what else I can do to help others, educate others, and myself learn more about this profession.
Working as a pro, how do you still maintain work-life balance?
It is difficult in the deadline times especially, but I'm fortunate that I've worked for a firm that's always put family first, and my employer's always given me ample opportunity to make time. If I have a couple hours here when everything's settled at night, I would jump on and do a couple. That's what I loved about Taxfyle was I didn't have to be at the office to do any of it. I could do it from home remotely.
If you were talking to someone who didn't know what Taxfyle and what Taxfile's outsourcing service was, or even what being a Taxfyle Pro is, how would you explain it to them?
So I kind of had this conversation a few times, and I've talked with others and kind of referenced it to like a gig economy job, say like Uber, where it's, I don't want to say Uber if we're not allowed, but it's kind of like the Uber of tax prep. You have the retail side, which is maybe some individuals out there is looking for someone to do their taxes and they don't know where to go. Taxfyle is kind of the broker, and they set them up with a CPA or an enrolled agent, and that way they're able to get their taxes done. Same with all the outsourcing workspaces I'm on. It's a CPA firm. Maybe they're grown at a pretty fast rate and they're not able to keep up. It's something to help them out as well. So it's basically tax prep on demand. That's kind of how I always looked at it.
As a Taxfyle Pro, how have you helped firms that have outsourced with you?
I feel like I've always provided a pretty high level of work. We hold ourselves a pretty high standard at our firm, and I've treated every workspace I've been put on with Taxfyle as if it was working for my own clients. I don't take any shortcuts with it. I put in the work same as I would if I'm doing a return or a project for an in-house client here.
How can other firms benefit from using Taxfile's outsourcing and staffing service during the busy season?
I would just say if you're a firm that has experienced some growth, maybe you acquired a new client set from a CPA that's retired, CPAs are retiring at an alarming rate these days, so there seems to be more work to be done than there are available CPAs. Look into Taxfyle. It's something that where you get set up with someone that you know is gonna. There's not the unknown. Say rather than going through the process of hiring a new pro on site, if you would have to go through the background checks, the hiring process, getting them set up with your HR department and payroll, all that. You could just go to Taxfyle and they would set you up, say, how many returns do you need done? This is your contract. You'll submit 75 returns for this period and we'll get these done for you. And I feel like that's always been a pretty good model, especially for CPAs, because a lot of times we don't have time to go out and hire a new pro or go through that whole process. So it kind of expedites that and takes it to where it's no longer an unknown. You at least know that with Taxfyle entering whatever year y'all are in now, and I don't remember exactly, that it's a model that works.
When you're working with a firm for the first time, how do you integrate yourself with their workflow so that you can immediately start working on jobs that they're submitting rather than needing to be trained and get up to speed with their way of things?
So for that, I mean, I think it's with that as with as any other client. Communication's key. Some firms, they like a certain way that things are done. Others have another way. So I always have to make sure that as I'm working on that workspace, I'm in that correct frame of mind. I know that does this firm, or they want the work papers prepared? Do they want them prepared and organized, or is it just one that I'm just going to prepare the return itself within the tax software and maybe provide a few notes? With the chat feature within Taxfyle, it takes a lot of that guesswork out because I'm able to talk with the other champion and just say, hey, here's what I'm finding. Here's my notes on the return I'm working on. Let me know how you want to approach this.
What makes a good engagement with your firm?
So for us, I guess, you mean like a good tax engagement?
Yeah.
Okay. For us, we would consider a good engagement if they're going to be submitting jobs where I like to see when they submit jobs and they have all the documents already there. That way, we're able to get it done quickly, get it back on a maybe 48-hour turnaround, and the job's able to be closed. Now, that doesn't happen maybe but 10% of the time. So I always like to make sure that we have that back and forth and that the other pro is going to be available to answer any questions I might have, let them know that there is a missing items list, just stuff that we know that we same way that we operate within our own firm. Well, we have a procedure to where we get the initial prep done. We take a look and see what's missing. We do a review. We approach the client and let them know what's missing. And from there, we know then they're going to get us the missing items that we're able to finish at a later date.
When you're working on one of your workspaces, from start to finish, how long does it take for you to complete jobs? And what are the steps that you take to ensure everything is done precisely how it needs to be done?
So I like to keep my open job sorted by the deadline. And I know from the time that it's submitted, I keep an eye on whether if it's a remote login job, there's 10 to 2 separate jobs that I have one on these separate workspaces. Am I remote logging into the other pros software, or am I preparing their client on my software and then furnishing a backup? If it's a remote login, as soon as the job's uploaded and I know that I have access to their work, then I will get that typically done on a 48-hour turnaround as per Taxfyle's standard operating procedures. Give them a missing items list. From there, it just depends on the communication with them and their client. If they're able to furnish the new documents, then great, they'll get it to me and we'll make the changes, update it as the stuff comes in. Or sometimes they'll just say, look, we'll take care of that on our side. Let's go ahead and close it out. For preparing the other jobs, that the ones I'm preparing on our software, it's kind of the same. And the only difference is that I'm receiving it all. I'm going to be uploading a backup to my software and then working it within our software just normally as I would for any of our personal clients. And then when I'm done with it, I will have my list of notes and I will give them the list of notes, open items, missing documents, let them know here's what's up. How do you want to treat it? Let me know if you need the backup back. And if not, we'll put it on hold until we get the rest of the information. And sometimes, I mean, from a lot of them, it's closed within a week, 7 to 10 days. It all depends on how much stuff is missing. I've had jobs that have been for a couple months, but that's because maybe we're waiting on a K1. At that point, we just make sure that we check in with each other every now and then, and I'll go back through my list of jobs on the work layer and to see when's the last time I touched base with this pro, and I'll see, hey, have you received any more K1s, for example? K1s are kind of a Achilles heel with this, just because sometimes they're not even ready till August. So it just really depends on when the information is readily available.
How do you make sure communication stays up to speed so that neither you or the firm you're working with is left hanging?
The chat feature, that's basically it. And, the chat feature, I feel in Taxfyle, it's really helpful. And if you have the chat feature, make sure you have the work layer app to where you're getting the push notifications on your phone. I'll get the push notifications and I will be responding to notifications daily. I'll let them know, even if it's something that, hey, this is what we're waiting on. You get a push notification sometimes where it says, you haven't heard from this workspace in a while. Why don't you check in? So, and sometimes there are a few, the actual Taxfyle support staff who will come in and say, hey, we noticed that you haven't had any communication with the client. Why don't you reach out to them? And that's happened to me only a few times, but I feel like there's a multi-point system to make sure that the communication keeps going, whether it's the app, the chat function itself, you get the emails, and the support staff is very helpful in that regard too.
You're talking to a Taxfyle Pro and they're beginning outsourcing for the first time. What are some of the best practices that you would give them so that they can get started easily without any hiccups?
I would say probably get on a workspace that uses a tax software that you're familiar with. And then once you're comfortable within that and you get the back and forth and the ebb and flows within the jobs, then maybe move on to another workspace or learn another tax software. Maybe you have a tax software that you're not fully familiar with as your main software, but that's kind of what I would say is get your don't put all your eggs in one basket. Try to get across as many workspaces as possible. And that way you can see what works for you and maybe what doesn't work. I've always tried to, anytime there's a bit of a workspace addition, I've been reached out by the staff at Taxfyle. We have a new workspace. Would you be interested in at least meeting with the firm, the outsourcing firm? And I'm always willing to meet other pros. I like learning what other people are doing. Maybe it helps me see there's efficiencies that I might be missing out on. So for other people that are looking into this, I would say get in there and start with what you're comfortable with, but don't be afraid to learn new things. Because once you realize that you can, maybe you're in UltraTax or Lacert or Drake or CCH, the more you become familiar with as many different options, you're broaden your horizons and aid your opportunities with Taxfyle.
What types of tax filing software are you adept at filing with? And how did you teach yourself all these different types of software and, learning that proficiency?
So I'm a primarily ultra-tax, and I've been working in ultra-tax for the last 12 years. But I'm also proficient in Lasser, Drake, and CCH Access. CCH Access was the one I've learned most recently, and as long as you know what a tax return kind of looks like, then you can make it work for you. You can kind of go in and see, okay, I know here's the income items, here's the deduction items, the adjustments to income, credits, what have you. That's how I've always approached it. And these tax softwares, whether they're UltraTax or CCH, they always have a little search function inside of it. And so if it's something you're not totally familiar with and you don't know where to find it, I've always found that just typing in the search function, like, if it's cancellation of debt or something, that's just the first thing that popped in my mind. You don't know where to put it in the software. You search for it, and it'll usually take you right to the screen. So, I've in this 15, going on 16 years of being in this business, I've had to adapt. We started out with Lasser. I've done contract work for other CPA firms within the city that use Drake, and then just taught myself how to do CCH Access. And all of those have helped me to where I've been able to be on multiple workspaces for Taxfyle and keep this additional revenue stream coming. So it's been really nice.
While you're a Taxfyle Pro, you obviously work at a firm. And earlier in this call, you talked about how Taxfile's outsourcing service can be an ideal solution for firms that don't have the bandwidth to hire and train, or even are struggling to find staffing. So what I want to know is, from your perspective, why does the accounting and tax industry have a challenge staffing firms nationwide?
That's an interesting question, and I wish I had the answer. I don't really. I could maybe tell you that, 15 years ago when I was in school, and I went to a fairly large university, Texas State University in San Marcos, it didn't seem that there were a lot of accounting majors, at least once I got into my later classes, my upper graduate courses. It seemed like it's a degree that really weeds out the people who are not willing to commit. And you can see that with I've heard something at one of Thomson Reuters Synergy conferences that within the next 15 years, some astronomical number, like 75% of all licensed CPAs will be of retiring age, and there's not enough to replace them. And I think maybe that people don't look at accounting as, they kind of look at it as a stuffy, maybe it's an old, outdated profession, but it's really what you make of it. And I think a lot of people are now, you see, everyone's going into engineering, communications. But from my perspective, when I was in college, it just seemed like accounting was something that just really was unforgiving to a lot of undergraduates. And so once they couldn't cut it, they went to other places.
I've heard about like how turnover and staff retention is also difficult. I guess from your perspective, what does it take to keep somebody on staff for 15 years?
I think it's just I don't know. I'd have to ask my employer what it takes to keep someone. The workload's always been very good. I feel like me and my employer, we have an understanding. We have a lot of the same values, and I know what he's about, and he's someone I deeply respect. And I've seen the work that he has been willing to put in, and it's always something that I've wanted for myself. So, now here I am, 15 years later, and trying to just only make myself more in that image and try to kind of mimic, I guess, what I've learned from him.
What are some of the benefits that you appreciate most about being a Taxfyle Pro?
When I first started with Taxfyle, what I really liked was you get the job, you prepare the job, and then you're done with the job. And it's not the same. Um, in public accounting, you deal with a lot of the clients, and it's something that I've learned to deal with being in public accounting. With I will get 40 phone calls, emails. I'll have 8 meetings a week. But with Taxfyle, you just get the meat, and it's just job after job after job. And so a lot of times, if you just want to, it's kind of like a little, I guess, decompression for me, is to just be able to know that I have this job and I can do it start to finish. And then once the job's complete, I know I'm done with it. Um, it really, in this profession, one of the things I don't like is when I'm working and I get to something about maybe 75% of the way through, and then I'm stuck. I'm at a impasse, and then I have to wait until we get more information, or maybe I'm missing some bank statements from a client, and it just kind of, that part frustrates me when it's you get the jobs and you're not able to complete them. And so that's kind of what the benefit was, you could really see that, you're able to complete a lot of jobs. And in the last 2 years, I've completed 600 plus jobs for Taxfyle.
And when it comes to outsourcing or firms, what do you appreciate the most about that aspect of being a Taxfyle Pro?
Well, I think when you're helping a firm and they're outsourcing work to you, they have an appreciation for what you're doing. They know that you're really helping them out. And that's always felt, I don't need the thanks or the gratitude, but it feels, we've all been in a spot where we might need someone to help us out with something. And it makes me feel better that I can help someone else out in need, whether it's they have a job that they need done, or maybe they needed something reviewed. And while I'm reviewing it, I find a mistake that someone else missed. And that always gives you a sense of accomplishment. And I think when you're doing work like this, that sense of accomplishment is what keeps you going.
And is there anything I may not have asked you about the benefits of firms being able to outsource and tap into somebody like you who has not only experience, but a passion for filing taxes that you think is important that people know about?
I can't think of anything that you haven't asked, but I would just say, if you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, you're not alone. In this profession, I think that's almost a default setting. But the fact that Taxfyle's out there helping, brokering these relationships, is something, it's incredible. It's people out there can find the help, and the help that they can find it's more than adequate. And so I always think that if you're a CPA and you think that you're just in over your head, you don't want to do it anymore, maybe Taxfyle is a solution for you.
And Russell, when it comes to tax season, obviously because you're a pro and you've got a lot of things to juggle, how do you prevent yourself from feeling stressed or overwhelmed?
I have 3 young kids at home. And so I know that when I get done with the work, I get to go home, see my family, whether it's at my son's baseball games or spending time with my daughter, who just turned 19 months. That does a lot to help with that. I try not to get too bogged down. And I know that, I've never missed deadlines, and I don't intend to now. That's just something that I always look around and see what I have. And I know that, tomorrow is going to be a new day. We're going to get it done. We always get it done. So why worry? Right?
Exactly. Russell, I appreciate that you had so much time to speak with me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, I enjoyed it too. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. That was this month's episode of Pro Spotlight. Please be sure to subscribe and follow us on social media. For helpful tips, whether you run your firm, are an accountant, or just want to know a little bit more about how to file taxes, check out our blog at taxfile.com.